The story begins in a dark underground parking lot where a group of superpowered criminals surround one of their own, a frightened man named Jack, and they beat him without mercy because he fails to complete his mission to kill Walter Locke, also known as Payback. And instead of finishing the job, Jack only manages to murder Walter Locke's family, which makes the criminals furious and afraid of what Walter Locke will do when he finds out. As they continue attacking Jack, Walter Locke suddenly arrives at the parking structure, and he calmly raises his weapon and begins shooting at the villains, killing most of them within moments as gunfire echoes across the concrete walls. Yet one of the attackers has bulletproof skin and quickly shields another criminal behind his body, which forces Walter Locke to stop shooting and move forward to fight them with his bare hands. Walter Locke shows no hesitation as he steps into close combat, and he defeats both of the remaining attackers with brutal strength and controlled rage, overpowering them and ending their lives with steady determination. And when the fight is over, only Jack remains alive and trembling in fear, and Walter Locke approaches him slowly with the heavy weight of grief and anger over the death of his daughter, and he kills Jack with his own hands to avenge his child, leaving the underground parking lot silent except for distant sirens that grow louder as police vehicles rush toward the scene. And shortly after the massacre, officers surround Walter Locke and arrest him without resistance. Before this violent event, the world already changes forever because of the Pulse, which begins when nations use nuclear weapons during war and cause unimaginable destruction, and the devastation leads to protests in major cities around the globe as food, water, and energy become scarce. And during this chaos, some survivors experience genetic mutations that give them superhuman powers. Yet instead of bringing hope, these abilities create more fear and disorder, as many superhumans use their powers recklessly or violently. And in response to the growing crisis, the United States government creates the super law to control enhanced individuals and builds Tiburon Prison, a maximum security facility designed specifically to contain supervillains and prevent them from escaping. Walter Locke killed more than 50 criminals in his personal mission for justice, and although some citizens quietly admire him, the law considers him a dangerous superhuman who must be locked away permanently, and he is sentenced to spend the rest of his life inside Tiburon, where enhanced inmates are restrained with advanced technology and constantly monitored. And inside this prison, the facility is overseen by Overseer Warden Devlin, a strict and controversial authority figure who faces accusations of inhumane treatment toward prisoners. And during a tense interview, he reacts angrily to reporters who question his methods and suggests that the prison abuses its inmates, and Warden Devlin firmly denies every accusation and proudly states that no prisoner escapes during his time in charge. Yet, as the questioning continues and the pressure grows, he feels overwhelmed and abruptly disconnects from the interview, leaving behind suspicion and tension that suggest deeper secrets hidden within the walls of Tiburon Prison. Sometime after Walter Locke is arrested, he is transferred to Tiburon Prison along with several other superhuman inmates, and he does not arrive there with fear or regret, but with a strong and dangerous purpose, because he secretly wants to eliminate as many violent superhumans as possible from inside the prison walls, believing that the world will be safer if people like them no longer exist. Among the new prisoners, there is a young man named Diego Diaz, who has a rare and painful ability that allows him to feel the emotions of others and even experience their physical pain as if it is his own. Because of this unusual power, the guards quietly assume that Diego Diaz will struggle in a place filled with hardened criminals, who are often described as living weapons due to the destruction they can cause. Tiburon is built as a maximum security facility designed specifically to contain enhanced individuals, and strict control systems are placed on every inmate to prevent them from using their supernatural abilities freely, while Warden Devlin makes it clear from the very beginning that the prison operates under his authority alone, and that every movement, every action, and every decision inside the walls happens according to his rules, and he warns the new arrivals not to test his patience because this institution is his domain. Later, the prisoners gather together in the courtyard under the watchful eyes of armed guards positioned above them, and tension spreads through the open space as powerful inmates quietly observe one another, measuring strength and reputation without saying much. During this gathering, Walter Locke encounters Diamond Jim, who turns out to be the brother of a criminal Walter Locke kills in his earlier campaign against crime, and the history between them quickly turns their meeting into a violent confrontation. and even without using any superhuman abilities, the two men engage in a fierce hand-to-hand fight that draws the attention of everyone around them. And Walter Locke shows relentless determination as he overpowers Diamond Jim with heavy strikes and controlled aggression, eventually forcing him to the ground in defeat. And just as Walter Locke prepares to end the fight completely, the guards rush in to stop him and subdue him with force, pushing him down and beating him to remind everyone that no prisoner controls the yard except the authorities, and both Walter Locke and Diamond Jim are then taken away to receive medical treatment under supervision. Elsewhere inside the prison, Diego Diaz begins adjusting to his new reality, and he meets an inmate who has been here from past 10 years, Gordon Tweedy, an experienced inmate who has the ability to generate and manipulate electricity, and who carries himself with the confidence of someone who survives many battles before stricter controls are introduced in the prison. And as they walk through the corridors, Gordon Tweedy calmly explains the unspoken rules that help prisoners survive, telling Diego Diaz that keeping a low profile, avoiding unnecessary conflicts, and choosing alliances carefully are essential for staying alive in such a dangerous place. Eventually, Diego Diaz mentions Julius Loeb, saying that he hears frightening stories about how Julius Loeb once manipulates a woman's mind and forces her to harm her own family, and how he allegedly uses telekinetic power in cruel and disturbing ways against his enemies. And Gordon Tweedy's confident expression becomes more serious as he admits that Julius Loeb possesses an extraordinary level of mental power that makes him nearly impossible to stop when he is not restrained. And he explains that even the toughest inmates prefer not to speak too openly about him because fear still surrounds his name inside the prison. And Gordon Tweedy strongly advises Diego Diaz to stay far away from Julius Loeb, understanding that in San Tiburon, survival often depends on knowing which dangers are too powerful to challenge. On that same day, Julius Loeb is escorted through cold metal corridors and taken into a dark, isolated room where a court panel reviews his parole request for the 4th time. And the atmosphere feels formal but meaningless because Julius Loeb openly mocks the entire proceeding with calm confidence, fully aware that a criminal with his reputation and mental abilities will never truly be granted freedom. And as the officials speak about rehabilitation and public safety, he treats the discussion like a performance rather than a real opportunity. Soon, Warden Devlin, who uses the legal process as an excuse to meet Julius Loeb in private without raising suspicion, and once they are alone, Warden Devlin reveals his true intention by explaining that he plans to retire soon and wants financial security before stepping away from power. Warden Devlin then orders Julius Loeb to transfer his hidden fortune into a personal bank account under his control, making it clear that refusal will result in severe consequences and possibly death inside the prison. Yet Julius Loeb remains calm and composed as always and agrees to cooperate, though he smoothly explains that he requires certain conditions and resources to make such a transfer possible, subtly reminding Warden Devlin that even in captivity, he still holds influence and leverage. Back in the infirmary, a doctor moves from bed to bed, examining injured inmates after the violent confrontation in the yard. And beside Walter Locke lies a prisoner whose head is missing, yet whose body continues to regenerate tissue and survive due to his unusual biological power, creating an unsettling but ordinary sight within the strange world of San Tiburon. And Diego Diaz enters the room quietly to collect trash and clean surfaces because the staff considers him less threatening compared to other inmates. Dr. Isabel Josephs notices Diego Diaz working carefully and begins speaking with him in a calm and friendly tone, sharing that she genuinely believes in helping patients and finds meaning in her medical work, despite the dangerous environment. And after finishing her brief conversation, she walks into another room to attend to the psychological evaluation of Julius Loeb. Without warning, Walter Locke forces his way into the room and confronts Dr. Isabel Josephs, and driven by rage and his belief that Julius Loeb represents pure evil, he grabs Dr. Isabel Josephs and strangles her until she loses consciousness. Determined to remove any obstacle between himself and his true target, and filled with fury, he approaches Julius Loeb with the intention of killing him once and for all, knowing the terrible stories about his manipulative crimes, while Julius Loeb remains disturbingly calm and even mocks the cross-shaped scar on Walter Locke's face, provoking him further and testing his control. Just as Walter Locke prepares to finish the attack, Diego Diaz rushes into the room and intervenes, refusing to allow another killing to happen before his eyes, and the two engage in a physical struggle that quickly becomes intense despite Diego Diaz not being a trained fighter, and they continue grappling until guards storm in to separate them and restore order. News of the incident spreads rapidly throughout the prison population, manipulation, and many inmates begin to respect Diego Diaz for daring to confront Walter Locke alone and for protecting Julius Loeb despite his terrifying reputation. And Darius, who serves as Julius Loeb's loyal associate, escorts Diego Diaz to the cell block where Julius Loeb personally acknowledges his action and expresses interest in forming a strategic friendship built on exchanged favors and mutual benefit. Meanwhile, Felicia Johnson, the assistant to Warden Devlin, uncovers evidence of the secret financial arrangement between her superior and Julius Loeb, and when she confronts Warden Devlin about the corruption, he attempts to silence her concerns by promising a promotion immediately after his retirement, while simultaneously threatening to terminate her position if she exposes the illegal deal, creating a web of manipulation that mirrors the very criminal behavior he claims to control within San Tiburon. The following days, inside San Tiburon continue with a tense sense of routine. As guards patrol the corridors, inmates gather in controlled spaces, and the fragile balance between authority and rebellion holds for the moment. Gordon Tweedy, who spends 10 long years inside the prison without causing major trouble, finally receives another opportunity to request parole, and he enters the hearing room with cautious hope, answering the panel's questions politely and explaining that he reflects on his past mistakes and understands the damage he causes before his imprisonment. However, the officials continue pressing him with difficult questions about how he would fit back into society and whether the community could ever trust someone with his abilities. And as the questioning becomes sharper, Gordon Tweedy feels cornered and humiliated, his frustration rising until he can no longer hide his anger. And despite his relatively calm record inside San Tiburon, his parole request is denied once again, leaving him devastated and emotionally exhausted. At the same time, Julius Loeb quietly moves pieces of a larger strategy from within his cell, carefully shaping an escape plan through subtle influence and calculated timing, and Darius, who remains loyal to Julius Loeb, discreetly passes a small object to Gordon Tweedy, while also observing Walter Locke in the yard, recognizing that multiple tensions inside the prison can be used to create distraction and chaos. Seeing an opportunity for revenge against the system that repeatedly denies him freedom, Gordon Tweedy removes his prison uniform to move more freely and uses the hidden object to unlock his restraint device, and once he frees himself, he climbs onto a table in a maintenance area and pulls down an exposed wire to channel electricity directly into his body, recharging his power with visible intensity. Fueled by anger and renewed strength, Gordon Tweedy attacks a nearby guard and kills him before moving deeper into the facility, unleashing electrical surges that disrupt the prison's power grid and disable the systems that normally suppress the inmates' abilities. And as the control mechanisms fail, the prison erupts into chaos with superhuman prisoners fighting each other, settling old scores, and testing their restored powers against rivals and guards alike. Walter Locke stands in the yard surrounded by disorder, yet feels disappointed that no one dares to challenge him directly, as many inmates focus instead on their own survival. And eventually the emergency systems are restored and the suppression controls reactivate, sending waves of energy through the prison population that force the rioting inmates back into submission and return them to their cells. Amid the confusion, Gordon Tweedy avoids immediate capture and makes his way to the infirmary, where he pauses near a window and looks outside at the distant world beyond the walls, expressing deep exhaustion from years of confinement and lost chances at freedom. And in that vulnerable moment, Officer Liz Morales suddenly attacks him from behind after receiving direct orders from Warden Devlin to eliminate him for causing the uprising. Although Officer Liz Morales hesitates and claims she cannot carry out such an order, Gordon Tweedy tells her to finish what she starts, and the confrontation ends with her striking him fatally, after which the official report claims that he dies from falling off the roof during an attempted escape. News of Gordon Tweedy's death spreads quickly through San Tiburon, and it is quietly acknowledged that 12 inmates die in the facility that year. Yet Warden Devlin refuses to publicly address the circumstances of those deaths, maintaining control through silence and authority. Later, he summons Diego Diaz and escorts him to a hidden chamber where prisoners are subjected to extreme isolation and psychological suffering, explaining that time feels slower inside that place, and that resistance eventually breaks under such pressure. Warden Devlin reveals his suspicion that the riot is orchestrated by Julius Loeb, and implies that Diego Diaz shares a secret understanding with him due to their recent closeness, and he demands that Diego Diaz report everything he knows about Julius Loeb unless he wishes to be sent into that chamber himself. Yet, despite intimidation and threats, Warden Devlin fails to extract any useful information from Diego Diaz, deepening the silent conflict growing within the prison walls. Tension continues to rise inside San Tiburon as Warden Devlin personally visits Julius Loeb in his cell, stepping inside with controlled authority and warning him not to entertain any thoughts of escape, making it clear that the prison remains under firm control despite recent unrest. Warden Devlin reminds Julius Loeb about the financial arrangement between them and orders him to transfer the money as quickly as possible, believing that with the proper restrictions in place there is no realistic chance for Julius Loeb to outmaneuver the system. Julius Loeb listens calmly and agrees to cooperate, yet he explains with calculated patience that transferring such hidden assets is a complex process that requires more time and preparation, subtly delaying the task while maintaining the appearance of compliance. The next day, guards move down into the basement, accompanied by a technician to repair the electrical infrastructure damaged during Gordon Tweedy's destructive outburst. And while the staff focuses on restoring order above ground, the prisoners receive envelopes from their families containing photographs that briefly remind them of life beyond the prison walls, creating a rare moment of quiet reflection amid the constant tension. At the same time, Julius Loeb manages to secure access to a tablet device, and with precise intelligence, he begins constructing a hidden virus program designed to infiltrate the prison's control systems as part of a carefully timed escape plan that unfolds piece by piece. Elsewhere, Walter Locke uses a sharp object to carve a cross into his own face, marking himself with a symbol that reflects both pain and conviction, and afterward he approaches Diamond Jim once again, seeking another confrontation. Yet this time, Diamond Jim refuses to fight and chooses instead to wait patiently for an opportunity that better serves his interests. Meanwhile, Diego Diaz visits Julius Loeb and presses him for assurance that he will help him leave the prison safely, hoping that their uneasy alliance holds some promise of freedom. But when Julius Loeb refuses to reveal the full details of his strategy, Diego Diaz grows frustrated and leaves the cell block in anger, uncertain whether he can truly trust the mastermind. As the day of Warden Devlin's retirement arrives, he announces that Captain Jason Brody will take over leadership of San Tiburon, a decision that deeply disappoints Felicia Johnson, who expects advancement after her loyalty and silence regarding Devlin's corruption. And later, Warden Devlin meets Julius Loeb once more and provides him with a tablet so the promised money transfer can finally be completed, assuring him that in return, he will enjoy greater comfort and privileges inside the prison. Julius Loeb begins the financial transaction, while secretly embedding his virus into the system without Warden Devlin's awareness. And as the program spreads through the digital network, it disables the mechanisms that suppress the prisoner's abilities, causing those restraints to lose their effect and allowing superhuman powers to surge back to life throughout the facility. The sudden restoration of abilities sparks a second riot far more intense than the first, as prisoners attack guards and clash violently with one another in an explosion of long-contained rage and ambition. And in the midst of this chaos, Diego Diaz remains in the infirmary where he is overwhelmed by waves of pain and emotion radiating from every corner of the prison. Yet despite the crushing intensity of what he feels, he manages to steady himself with the help of Dr. Isabel Josephs, who quickly comforts him and encourages him to focus on controlling his empathy so he does not lose himself in the suffering surrounding him. Soon, the riot spreads through San Tiburon with unstoppable force, and in the middle of the chaos, Felicia Johnson urgently calls Warden Devlin to inform him that the entire prison is collapsing into disorder, prompting him to rush toward his office in an attempt to regain control. Yet before he can secure the situation, Julius Loeb remotely locks the door and traps him inside, calmly tightening his control over events. The prison yard becomes a battlefield where inmates unleash a wide range of superpowers, with some making people vanish instantly, others creating invisible force fields for protection, some spreading infection through their breath, and others forming illusionary clones that confuse both guards and rivals, while destruction also spreads through the corridors and cell blocks as long-contained aggression explodes all at once. Walter Locke finds himself struggling against Diamond Jim, whose transformed, bulletproof body makes direct attacks nearly useless. And although Walter Locke fights with relentless determination, he begins to lose ground until a sudden distraction breaks Diamond Jim's focus, and Walter Locke disappears from his sight, shifting the momentum of the confrontation. Meanwhile, Captain Jason Brody turns to Felicia Johnson for guidance, and she explains that the prison's stability depends on a generator located in the basement, and that restarting it will restore the control systems and suppress the inmates' powers again. Felicia Johnson guides Captain Jason Brody step by step over the radio, but when he reaches the basement, the signal fails, leaving him alone in a dark mechanical space filled with damaged equipment and rising tension. Diamond Jim suddenly appears and attacks Captain Jason Brody, revealing during the struggle that one of the guards secretly assists Julius Loeb with his escape plan. And at first, Captain Jason Brody is clearly overpowered because he is an ordinary human, facing a nearly invulnerable opponent. Yet in a desperate moment, he breaks a pipe that releases a burst of hot steam directly onto Diamond Jim, disorienting him long enough for exposed wiring and electricity to finish the job, resulting in Diamond Jim's death. Elsewhere, Julius Loeb reveals to Warden Devlin that he possesses another hidden ability unknown to almost everyone, explaining that he can switch his consciousness with another person, and this shocking revelation unfolds as he executes the final stage of his plan by exchanging minds with Warden Devlin, leaving Devlin trapped inside his body, while Julius Loeb now controls Devlin's physical form, and immediately after the switch, he knocks Devlin unconscious to prevent resistance. At the same time, Captain Jason Brody successfully restarts the generator, restoring the prison's control systems and weakening the riot as order gradually returns. When the office door finally opens, Felicia Johnson fails to notice that the consciousness switch occurs, and believing she is speaking to Warden Devlin, she obeys his instructions as he orders that Julius Loeb, who is actually Devlin trapped in another body, be taken to the torture chamber. And despite desperate attempts to explain the truth, the guards dismiss his words as manipulation and carry him away. Soon after, Julius Loeb, now in Devlin's body, promotes Felicia Johnson to supervisor of San Tiburon, fulfilling the promise that Devlin once makes to her and leaving her satisfied with her new authority. Soon the guards restore order and escort the remaining prisoners back to their cells. And although the riot causes destruction, Walter Locke survives the chaos once again, proving his resilience. He laughs eccentrically as he lies on top of the corpses of inmates he have killed. Later, time passes, and under Felicia Johnson's leadership, the prison undergoes structural changes, including a new system for classifying inmates based on the level of danger posed by their powers. And because Diego Diaz is not considered highly dangerous, he is scheduled for transfer to another facility. Before leaving, he thanks Dr. Isabel Josephs for her kindness and says goodbye with quiet gratitude, while Captain Jason Brody decides to resign from his position, unwilling to continue working in such a morally compromised environment. Moreover, Darius is granted release at the request of Julius Loeb, who is still in body of Warden Devlin. Moreover, as Darius does not actively participate in the riot and therefore qualifies more easily for freedom. And in the final scenes, Julius Loeb, now fully successful in his elaborate manipulation, boards a private flight to Switzerland with Darius, carrying access to billions of dollars and preparing to begin a new life far from San Tiburon, leaving behind a prison that never truly understands how completely it is outplayed.